Story 1. They say every town has its ghost story. Ours had a circus. Not a story about a circus, but the thing itself, moldering at the edge of the county line. The Cirque du Chagrin. The Circus of Sorrow. It arrived one summer in the late 70s and never left. The official story was bankruptcy. The local legend, whispered after a few beers, was much darker. It spoke of performers vanishing, of strange accidents under the big top, and of a cruel ringmaster named Silas Grimaldi, who treated his troupe like prisoners. One morning, the town woke up, and the circus was simply silent, abandoned overnight, as if its very soul had been snuffed out. As budding urban explorers, my friends Leo, Maya, and I saw it as the ultimate prize. We parked our car down a dirt track and approached on foot as dusk bled purple and orange across the sky. The main tent stood like a forgotten king's rotting crown, its red and white stripes faded to pink and grime. Rusted cages, once home to lions and bears, sat empty and ominous. "Creepy as hell," Maya whispered, pulling her jacket tighter. "It's just canvas and rust," Leo scoffed, ever the skeptic, clicking on his heavy-duty flashlight. "Come on." The air inside the big top was thick and still, heavy with the smell of decay, wet earth, and something cloyingly sweet, like rancid cotton candy. Our flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing rows of splintered bleachers surrounding a sawdust-covered ring. Above us, a trapeze hung motionless, like a gallows in the dark. We explored the performers' caravan trailers first. They were ransacked, but personal effects remained. A cracked hand mirror on a dusty vanity, a child's worn-out leather shoe, a set of juggling pins lined up neatly on a shelf. In one trailer, a music box sat open. As Leo's light passed over it, it began to play. A tinny, off-key rendition of Pop Goes the Weasel plinked out into the suffocating silence. Maya screamed. "It's just an old spring," Leo said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. He nudged it with his foot, and it fell silent. The real terror began when we returned to the main tent. We wanted one last look at the center ring. As we stood in the middle of the sawdust, a single flickering bulb directly above us sputtered to life. It cast a sickly yellow glow on the ring, plunging the surrounding bleachers into an even deeper, more absolute darkness. We froze. The power had been cut for decades. That's when we heard it. A single slow clap, echoing from the darkened stands. Clap. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't one of us. Clap. Clap. "Very funny," Leo called out, his voice trembling. "Whoever's out there, show yourself." A low chuckle answered him, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Show myself?" A theatrical voice rasped, dripping with a sinister showmanship. "But the show is for you, my dear guests." A private performance, you might say. Welcome to the grand finale of the Cirque du Chagrin. A figure stepped from the shadows into the edge of the light. He was impossibly tall and gaunt, dressed in a tattered, moth-eaten ringmaster's coat. His face was a mask of peeling white paint, with a smeared red smile that stretched too wide, and eyes that were nothing but dark, sunken pits. Silas Grimaldi. He wasn't alone. One by one, they shambled into the ring behind him. The performers. A contortionist whose limbs were twisted at permanent, unnatural angles, her neck bent back so she stared at the ceiling. A strong man, his skin gray and tight over bulging, decaying muscles. A pair of clowns, their painted-on smiles stark against their vacant, weeping eyes. They weren't ghosts. They were puppets, their bodies animated by some unseen horror, their movements jerky and wrong. These were the accidents. Grimaldi raised a bony hand. "And now, for our final act," he boomed, his dead eyes fixing on us. We didn't wait for an encore. We turned and ran. The ringmaster's cackling laugh pursued us, mingling with the wet, dragging sounds of his troops stumbling after us. The tent flaps we'd entered through were now laced shut, Panic seized me as I clawed at the heavy, mildewed canvas. I felt a frigid, five-fingered grip on my shoulder. I screamed, wrenching myself away with a sound of tearing fabric, and tumbled through a split in the canvas into the cool night air. We didn't stop running until the rusted gates of the circus were far behind us. We never went back. We never even spoke of it again. About a year later, morbid curiosity got the better of me. I drove out there, in the bright, safe light of a Saturday afternoon. But the field was empty, completely bare. There was no rotted tent, no rusted cages, no forgotten trailers. It was as if the Cirque du Chagrin had never been there at all. The only proof that I hadn't lost my mind was a single object half buried in the mud where the center ring would have been. A small, worn-out leather shoe. The show is over, but I know, deep in my bones, that some performances never truly end. They just wait for a new audience. Story 2. It's a story I've told only twice. Once to a therapist who suggested I was processing unresolved trauma through a fabricated narrative, and once to a priest who told me some doors are better left unopened. Neither of them understood. You don't fabricate the smell of rot and candy floss. There were 3 of us. Me, Liam, and Chloe. We were young, stupid, and fueled by the urban explorer's hubris that we were documentarians, not trespassers. Our target was Silas Croft's Cavalcade of Wonders, a traveling circus that had folded abruptly in the late 70s. The story was that half the performers vanished overnight after the final show in a remote Pennsylvanian field. The ringmaster, Silas Croft, was found days later, having hanged himself from the trapeze rigging. The circus was simply left there, a canvas and wood graveyard, to be swallowed by the earth. We found it at dusk, the perfect time for an atmosphere of dread. The rust-eaten archway still read, "Cavalcade of Wonders," in peeling blood-red paint. The silence was the first thing that got to me. It wasn't the quiet of an empty field. It was a heavy, listening silence, like the held breath before a scream. "Get a load of this," Liam said, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom to land on the main tent. It was a monstrous, sagging thing. Its stripes faded to the color of old bruises. The canvas was ripped in places, creating leering mouths that gaped into the darkness within. Chloe, ever the photographer, was already snapping pictures. "The decay is beautiful," she murmured. I didn't see beauty. I saw a tomb. We unzipped a stiff, mildewed flap and stepped inside. The air was thick, a putrid cocktail of damp soil, animal musk, and something sickeningly sweet, like sponge sugar left to ferment. Our flashlight beams danced across rows of splintered benches encircling a dirt ring. In the center stood a single dilapidated clown's pedestal, its paint chipped to reveal dark, sodden wood beneath. Liam, of course, went straight for it. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls," he boomed, his voice swallowed by the oppressive canvas. "Welcome to the greatest—" He stopped. We all heard it then. A faint, tinny melody, like a wind-up toy running down. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "It's just the wind," Chloe said, but her voice was a little too high, her camera a little too still. We decided to check the performers' wagons, a row of skeletal husks lined up behind the big top. Most were gutted, filled with dead leaves and trash. But the last one we checked was different. The door was ajar, and inside, it was almost pristine. A small vanity mirror was clouded with age, but on the table before it lay a set of grease paints, cracked and dry. A half-full glass of water sat beside them, a skin of gray mold on its surface. And hanging on a hook was a frilly, polka-dotted clown costume. It looked stiff, as if still holding the shape of its owner. Then, I saw the name meticulously painted above the mirror. Puddles. A floorboard creaked behind us. We spun around, flashlights blinding each other. Nothing. Just the wind again, whistling through the wagon's broken window. But the feeling of being watched was suddenly so intense, it was like a physical weight on my shoulders. "Let's go back to the main tent," I said, my throat dry. "I want to get out of here." Back under the big top, the air had changed. It was colder. The faint music was gone, replaced by that same suffocating silence. We stood in the center of the ring, our beams sweeping the cavernous dark. That's when Chloe's flashlight caught it. High above, in the rigging near the peak of the tent, a shape was silhouetted against a rip in the canvas. It was a trapeze swing, and it was moving, gently, back and forth, as if someone had just dismounted. Liam let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, very funny. Whoever's here, come on out." The only answer was the groan of rusted metal from above. Then, from the darkness of the performer's entrance, came a sound. Not a footstep. It was a soft, wet shuffling, a dragging sound. We pinned our lights on the entrance. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and impossibly thin, dressed in the frilly polka-dotted costume from the wagon. Its face was a mask of cracked white paint, a red smile slashed across its mouth like a wound. Its eyes were just dark holes, voids that seemed to drink the light. It was Puddles. He didn't move towards us. He just stood there, head cocked to one side. Then, slowly, he raised a white-gloved hand and offered a single, silent wave. The smile on his face never changed, but I felt the intention behind it. A horrific, ancient invitation. The show is about to begin, and you are the new act. We didn't scream. We didn't even think. We just ran. We burst through the tent flap and sprinted across the dead grass, the sound of that wet shuffling somehow right behind us. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Puddles was standing at the entrance to the tent, motionless, watching us go. But he wasn't alone. In the shadows behind him, I could see other shapes. The faint outline of a strong man, the glint of sequins on an acrobat, a silent, waiting audience. We never went back. We never spoke of it again. The friendship, like everything else that night, just rotted away. But sometimes, when the wind is just right and the night is too quiet, I can still smell it. That cloying, impossible scent of stale sugar and damp earth. And I know, with a certainty that chills my soul, that the show at Silas Croft's Cavalcade of Wonders never really ended. They're just waiting for a new audience.